The red warning lights flashed across the mining station's control room as Commander Vex stared at the tactical display in horror. Another one of his ships had just vanished from the screen, consumed by the relentless mechanical swarm that had appeared from nowhere just 3 hours ago. The Villani were a peaceful species. They had never known war, never built weapons of destruction, never needed to. Their homeworld was a gentle paradise with soft gravity and no natural predators. For thousands of years they had lived in harmony, expanding slowly across nearby systems to mine precious metals and rare elements. Violence was something they read about in ancient texts, not something they experienced. But now, death had come to Kepler 44b, Vex's forearms. Shook as he tried to coordinate the evacuation of the remaining mining platforms. His people were dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The attacking ships moved like hungry predators, sleek and deadly. They seemed to absorb everything they touched, breaking down matter at the molecular level and incorporating it into their own hulls. "Commander, the transport ships are requesting permission to retreat to hyperspace," reported his communications officer, her voice high with panic. "The miners on Platform 7 are trapped. The mechanical ships have surrounded them." Through the viewport decks, could see the distant explosions as another mining facility was consumed. The mechanical attackers showed no mercy, no hesitation. They simply devoured everything in their path like a plague of metal locusts. "Open a channel to all remaining ships," Vex ordered, his voice barely steady. "Full retreat. Abandon all mining operations and return to the homeworld immediately." But even as he gave the order, Vex knew it was too late for many of his people. The mechanical ships were faster, more maneuverable. They would pick off the fleeing transports one by one until nothing remained but empty space and scattered debris. That's when he remembered the stories. The legends whispered in dark corners of space stations and trading posts. Tales of a species so violent, so dangerous that even mentioning their name made other races nervous. The humans. The Deathworlders from Cell 3. Most civilized species dismissed these stories as myths. Surely no race could be as savage as the legends claimed. No species could survive on a world with such crushing gravity, violent weather, and deadly predators. It was impossible. And yet the stories persisted. Vex had heard traders speak of human mercenaries who fought battles that would terrify entire fleets, of human soldiers who refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds, of human ships built not for exploration or trade but for war, pure, devastating war. His hands trembled as he activated the long-range emergency beacon. The legends were true. If humans really existed, then maybe they could help. Maybe they were the only ones who could help. "This is Commander Vex of the Villani mining fleet." He spoke into the transmitter, his voice cracking with desperation. "We are under attack by unknown mechanical forces. Our defenses have failed completely. We have no weapons, no way to fight back. Our people are dying." Another explosion lit up the darkness outside, closer this time. One of the mechanical ships had found their command station. "We have heard legends of the Deathworlders from Cell 3, Dex continued, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "If any humans receive this message, please, we beg you for help. We know you have no reason to trust us or help us, but we have nowhere else to turn." The transmission cut to static as a massive impact shook the station. Through the viewport, Vex could see one of the predatory machines approaching, its hull gleaming with absorbed metal from destroyed Villani ships. 47 light-years away, on the Villani homeworld, Elder Counselor Reth sat in the Great Council chamber, reviewing trade reports when the emergency transmission arrived. Message was garbled from the long-distance journey. It's filled with static and missing pieces, but the core message was clear enough. The chamber fell silent as the recording played. When Nex's voice mentioned Deathworlders, several counselors gasped audibly. When he said humans, 3 of them actually fled the chamber in terror. "This cannot be real," whispered Counselor Vex, his pale blue skin turning even whiter. "Commander Vex has lost his mind from fear. No one would be desperate enough to call upon the humans." But Reth studied the transmission data carefully, The energy signatures were real. The coordinates matched their mining operation perfectly, and the terror in Nex's voice was genuine. Somewhere out there, his people were dying, and they had turned to the most feared species in known space for salvation. The stories about humans were legendary throughout the galaxy. They came from a world so hostile that it had forged them into perfect killers, a world with gravity that would crush most species, whether that could kill in minutes, and predators that hunted for sport. The humans had not only survived this nightmare world, they had thrived on it. They had conquered their entire planet through endless wars, then turned their attention to the stars. Other species spoke of human warships in hushed tones. Vessels designed not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose: destroying other ships. They carried weapons that could crack planets, armor that could withstand the fury of stars, and crews who treated death as just another enemy to defeat. "We cannot do this," Vex pleaded. "If we contact the humans, they might come here. They might decide our world looks like a nice place to conquer. We could be inviting our own destruction." But Reth looked at the star charts showing the location of Kepler 44 to be. Hundreds of his people were out there. He's probably already dead or dying. Could he abandon them to save himself from a threat that might never come? The decision tore at his soul. But in the end, there was no choice at all. "Send the beacon toward human space," Reth announced, his voice heavy with the weight of history. "May the ancestors forgive us for what we are about to unleash." As the transmission rocketed through hyperspace toward the distant Sol system, Reth could only pray that the humans would prove to be saviors rather than conquerors. The fate of his entire species now rested in the hands of the galaxy's most feared Deathworlders. The bridge of the UES Valiant hummed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Jack Morrison reviewed the morning reports. The 7th Fleet was 3 days into a routine patrol of the Outer Rim systems, checking for pirate activity and ensuring trade. Routes remained secure. It was supposed to be a boring assignment, the kind that let crews catch up on maintenance and training. That peaceful morning shattered when Lieutenant Katie Chun's console erupted in urgent beeping sounds. "Admiral, we're receiving an emergency transmission," she called out, her voice cutting through the bridge's calm atmosphere. "It's not coming from any human colony or ship. The signal pattern is completely unknown." Morrison set down his coffee and walked over to the communications station. In his 25 years of naval service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about the lieutenant's tone told him this wasn't just another false alarm or equipment malfunction. "Let me hear it," he ordered. The speakers crackled to life with static and garbled sounds that barely resembled language. The universal translation software struggled to make sense of the alien words, producing a choppy, broken message that was hard to follow. But even through the technical difficulties, the emotion came through clearly. Fear, desperation, pleading. "The computer is having trouble with the translation," Katie explained, her fingers working rapidly across her console. "But I'm picking up certain words repeatedly. Mining fleet. Under attack. Help needed. And sir, there's something else." They specifically mentioned humans and something called Sol-3, Captain Rick Hayes. Morrison's second-in-command looked up from his tactical display with concern written across his weathered face. "Admiral, this could be our first contact with an alien species. Protocol requires us to immediately report this to Fleet Command and wait for the diplomatic corps to handle initial negotiations." Morrison nodded slowly. He knew the protocols by heart. First contact situations were delicate affairs that required specialists, linguists, and politicians. One wrong move could start an interstellar war or destroy any chance of peaceful relations. The smart move was to relay the message to Earth and let the experts handle it. But as he listened to the transmission again, something in the alien's voice made his chest tighten. He had heard that same tone before in the voices of human colonists calling for evacuation as pirate fleets descended on their settlements. It was the sound of people who knew they were about to die. "Katie, how long would it take to get a message back to Fleet Command and receive a response?" Morrison asked. The lieutenant checked her calculations quickly. Given our current position and the relay stations, approximately 8 days for a full round trip, sir. And how long to reach the coordinates where this transmission originated? Hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, sir. Morrison stared at the star chart showing their position relative to the alien signal. 8 days versus 18 hours. The difference between bureaucratic caution and immediate action. The difference between following rules and saving lives? Captain Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. Jack, I understand what you're thinking, but we could be walking into anything. These aliens could be hostile. This could be a trap. We don't know anything about their technology or their intentions. Look at the fleet composition reports, Rick Morrison replied, pulling up the tactical displays. We've got 12 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 battleships. If this is a trap, we can handle ourselves. But if it's genuine, if there really are people out there dying while we debate protocol, then we'll have blood on our hands. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Every officer present understood the weight of the moment. This decision would either be remembered as a brilliant act of humanitarian intervention or a catastrophic violation of military procedure. Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice carried to every ship in the 7th Fleet. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison. We have received what appears to be a distress call from an unknown alien species. Situation appears to be urgent, with civilians under attack and requesting immediate assistance. While this violates standard first contact protocols, I am making the command decision to respond to this humanitarian crisis. He paused, looking around at his crew. Not one of them showed hesitation or doubt. They understood what it meant to be human. When someone called for help, you answered, regardless of the species or the risk. All ships prepare for immediate hyperspace. Jump to coordinates transmitted by Lieutenant Chen. We will maintain full tactical readiness and defensive positions upon arrival. If this is a trap, we will be ready. If it is genuine, we will render all possible assistance. Captain Hayes stepped up beside Morrison, his earlier concerns replaced by determination. Fleet reports ready for hyperspace transition, Admiral. All ships standing by for your order. Morrison took one last look at the alien transmission data. Somewhere out there, 47 light-years away, people were dying. Maybe they looked different. Maybe they spoke a different language. Maybe they came from a world unlike Earth, but they were asking for help. And that was enough. The 7th Fleet had been created to protect human colonies and trade routes. But today, they would learn that being human meant something more than just protecting your own species. It meant answering the call when anyone, anywhere, needed help against forces they couldn't face alone. Execute hyperspace jump, Morrison commanded. Let's go save some lives. The stars stretched into lines of light as 20 ships of the United Earth Navy disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward their first encounter with alien life under the worst possible circumstances. The 7th Fleet materialized from hyperspace in a brilliant flash of light, instantly dropping into what could only be described as a massacre. Admiral Morrison's first glimpse of the battlefield made his blood run cold. Scattered across the dark void of space were the twisted remains of alien mining ships, their hulls torn open and bleeding atmosphere into the vacuum. But it wasn't just wreckage floating in the darkness. Dozens of ships were still fighting for their lives, engaged in a hopeless battle against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The alien vessels were beautiful in their own way, with smooth curves and organic designs that looked more like living creatures than machines. They moved slowly and gracefully, clearly built for mining operations rather than combat. Their attackers were the complete opposite. The enemy ships looked like mechanical predators, all sharp angles and gleaming metal. They moved with frightening speed and precision, darting between the slower mining vessels like sharks attacking a school of fish. Every few seconds, another alien ship would explode in a brilliant fireball, adding to the growing field of debris. "My God," whispered Captain Hayes, staring at the tactical display. It's a slaughter." Lieutenant Katie Chen's voice cut through the bridge's stunned silence. "Admiral, I'm detecting at least 40 enemy vessels. They're using some kind of energy weapon that seems to break down matter at the molecular level. The alien mining ships have no effective defenses. Before Morrison could respond, the tactical situation changed dramatically. The mechanical attackers had noticed the human fleet's arrival, and they clearly didn't like uninvited guests. A dozen of the predatory ships broke off from their assault on the miners and turned toward the human formation. Commander Brian Walsh at the tactical station called out urgently, "Contact! Multiple bogies closing fast on our position. They're accelerating beyond anything in our databases. Estimated time to weapons range 45 seconds. Morrison felt the familiar calm that always settled over him in combat situations. This was what the 7th Fleet had trained for their entire careers. Not this exact scenario, perhaps, but the core principle remained the same. Protect those who couldn't protect themselves. All ships. Combat Formation Delta 7. Prepare main batteries for engagement. Target the lead enemy vessels and fire on my command." The human warships moved into position with practiced efficiency. These weren't exploration vessels or cargo haulers. They were instruments of war, built by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other. Every weapon system, every piece of armor, every tactical protocol had been forged in the endless conflicts. Of Earth's violent history, the mechanical attackers expected easy prey. They had been systematically destroying defenseless mining ships for hours, and they assumed these new arrivals would be equally helpless. They charged forward in loose formation, energy weapons already charging for what they thought would be another quick kill. They were wrong. The Hughes Valiant's main railgun fired first, sending a tungsten slug the size of a telephone pole screaming through space at 10% of light speed. The projectile hit the lead enemy ship dead center, punching completely through its hull and emerging from the other side in a shower of sparks and molten metal. The enemy ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was racing toward the human fleet with deadly intent. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and twisted wreckage. "Direct hit," Walsh reported with satisfaction. "Target destroyed." But Morrison was already focused on the bigger picture. All ships. Open fire. Show these machines what happens when they mess with defenseless civilians. The space around Kepler-44 to be erupted in violence as 20 human warships unleashed everything they had. Railguns fired tungsten penetrators that could crack asteroids. Missile tubes launched guided projectiles that could track targets across solar systems. Laser batteries focused enough energy to melt through armor plating like butter. The mechanical attackers, later identified as the Harvester Swarm, found themselves facing weapons and tactics they had never encountered before. Their energy shields, designed to absorb and redirect particle beams, were useless against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Their armor, built to withstand mining equipment and weak defensive lasers, crumpled like paper under the fury of human military. Technology. "Enemy formation is breaking apart," reported Captain Hayes, watching the tactical display with amazement. "They're trying to retreat, but our missile salvos are tracking them." Morrison opened a communication channel to the surviving alien vessels. The translation software was still struggling with their language, but he kept his message simple and clear. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Jack Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress call, and we're here to help. Get your civilians to safety while we handle these attackers." The response came back in broken, barely translated words. But the emotion was unmistakable. Relief, gratitude, hope. Meanwhile, the surface of Kepler-4 for to be, Major Danny Anderson was leading the first human ground mission to an alien world. His Marines had dropped from orbit in assault shuttles, heading for the mining facilities where alien workers were trapped by Harvester ground units. The mining complex was a maze of burning buildings and twisted metal. Harvester machines, the size of tanks, patrolled the corridors, hunting for survivors with mechanical precision. Anderson's squad moved through the wreckage carefully, their advanced armor protecting them from the toxic atmosphere and dangerous debris. "Movement ahead," reported Sergeant Beth Collins, her rifle trained on a doorway. "Multiple contacts, but the signatures don't match the enemy machines." Anderson activated his suit's external speakers and called out in the clearest voice he could. "Manage. Hello. We're here to help. We're humans from Earth. Don't be afraid." The door opened slowly, and Anderson got his first look at an alien species. The Villani were tall and thin, with 4 arms and pale blue skin. Their eyes were huge and dark, filled with terror as they stared at the armored humans. To them, Anderson and his Marines probably looked like metal demons, their faces hidden behind tactical visors and their bodies encased in battle armor. But Anderson's voice remained calm and reassuring. It's the same tone he had used when rescuing civilians from disaster. "Zones on Earth. We're here to get you out. Stay close and keep moving. We'll protect you." One of the aliens stepped forward hesitantly, speaking in their musical language. The translation software in Anderson's helmet struggled with the words, but managed to convey the basic meaning. "Are you the Deathworlders? It's the ones from South 3? Anderson smiled, though the alien couldn't see his face through his visor. "Yeah, that's us, the Deathworlders. And we came as fast as we could." The silence that followed the destruction of the last Harvester ship was almost deafening. For 6 brutal hours, the space around Kepler 442b had been filled with the thunder of railgun fire, the brilliant flashes of exploding missiles, and the crackling energy of alien weapons. Now there was nothing but the soft hum of life support systems and the distant glow of burning. Wreckage. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the EU's Valiant, watching the damage reports scroll across his tactical display, the numbers painted. A grim picture. 3 human ships had taken critical damage, and 2 more were operating on backup power only. They had won the battle, but victory had come at a steep price. "Casualty reports coming in from all ships," announced Lieutenant Katie Chen, her voice heavy with exhaustion. 43 wounded, 12 critical. The UES Defiant has lost life support on 3 decks, and the Thunderhawk's engine core is completely offline. They're running on emergency power. Captain Hayes moved beside Morrison, studying the tactical readouts with concern. The Defiant is venting atmosphere from her port side. Her hull plating is cracked in 6 places. She needs immediate repair. Work or she break apart under hyperspace stress. Morrison nodded grimly. They had saved the Villani mining operation, but his own fleet was badly damaged. Ships that had been pristine examples of human engineering just hours ago were now limping wrecks held together by emergency repairs and the skill of their crews. Down in the medical bays, Aptera Patricia Hayes worked frantically to save lives. Ships' medical facilities had been designed to handle human casualties, but now they were filled with wounded from 2 different species. The Villani injured presented unique challenges. Their biology was different enough from humans that standard medical procedures sometimes didn't work. "Doctor, the Villani in bed 7 is going into shock," called Nurse Tony Martinez. "His blood chemistry is unlike anything in our databases." Dr. Hayes looked up from the human Marine she was treating and wiped sweat from her forehead. "Keep monitoring his vital signs. Use the broad-spectrum stabilizers until we can figure out their physiology." What amazed her most was watching the interaction between the wounded from both species. The human soldiers, despite their own injuries, were helping to comfort the frightened Villani civilians. Language barriers meant nothing when someone was scared and in pain. A young Villani worker, barely more than a child by their species standards, sat trembling in one of the medical chairs. His arm had been badly burned by Harvester energy weapons, but he kept staring at the human Marines with a mixture of fear and fascination. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, his own shoulder wrapped in bandages, sat down next to the young alien and offered him a small candy bar from his emergency rations. He couldn't speak the Villani language, but his smile was universal. The young alien tentatively accepted the gift, his huge eyes filling with something that might have been hope. Elder Healer Kex, the Villani medical officer who had been rescued from the mining facility, watched these interactions with growing amazement. He approached Dr. Hayes as she finished treating a wounded pilot. "Your people," he said, through the translation device they had cobbled together, "they are not what we expected." Dr. Hayes looked around at her medical bay, where humans and Villani were working together to treat the wounded despite having met just hours ago. "What did you expect? The stories we heard called you Deathworlders, savage warriors who knew only violence and conquest. We thought you would be cold, emotionless killers." Hayes smiled tiredly, her hands still covered in both human and alien blood. Fear makes legends grow beyond reality. We're just people trying to do the right thing. Yes, we can fight when we have to, but that's not all we are. Kex's forearms moved in what might have been their version of a nod. I see this now. You fight fiercely to protect others, then show gentleness to heal the wounded. It is a strange combination. Not strange, Hayes replied. Human. The moment of relative peace was shattered when Lieutenant Colonel Frank Watson burst into the medical bay, his face grim with urgent news. He found Admiral Morrison checking on the wounded and pulled him aside for a private conversation. Admiral, we've finished analyzing the Harvester wreckage. Intelligence has some disturbing news. Morrison followed Watson to a quiet corner of the medical bay. What did you find, sir? This wasn't the main attack force. Based on the ship configurations and the tactical data we recovered, this was just a scouting group. Maybe 30 ships total. Morrison felt his blood turn cold. A scouting group? Then where's the main force? Watson activated a portable holographic display showing long-range sensor data. Our deep space sensors are picking up massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace. They're heading directly for the Volani homeworld. Admiral, we're talking about thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. The tactical display showed the approaching threat in stark detail. The Harvester main force was like a mechanical plague, consuming everything in its path as it moved from system to system. And now it was heading straight for a peaceful world, filled with billions of defenseless Volani civilians. Morrison stared at the display, his mind racing through impossible calculations. His fleet was damaged, outnumbered, and operating far from any human support. The smart tactical decision would be to retreat, report back to Earth, let the politicians decide how to respond to this new threat. But as he looked around the medical bay, seeing human and Volani wounded lying side by side, he knew there was only one choice he could make. The Volani had called for help, and humans had answered. That meant something. It created a bond that went beyond species or politics. How long until the main Harvester force reaches the Volani homeworld? Morrison asked. Watson checked his calculations. Approximately 18 hours, sir. Morrison walked back to Dr. Hayes, who was still treating the wounded from both species. Doctor, how quickly can you get our people ready for another fight? Hayes looked up from her patient, understanding immediately what he was asking. The critically wounded need at least a week of recovery time. The walking wounded, they could be back on duty in a few hours if absolutely necessary. Morrison nodded and activated his communicator, opening a channel to every ship in the fleet, all ships. This is Admiral Morrison. We have intelligence that the Harvester force we just defeated was only the beginning. A much larger enemy fleet is heading for the Volani homeworld. I know our ships are damaged. I know our people are wounded. I know we're outnumbered by odds that would make any sane officer retreat. He paused, looking around at the human, and Volani faces watching him. But 18 hours from now, billions of defenseless civilians are going to die unless someone stops this enemy. The Volani called for help, and we answered. That means something. We started this fight, and by God, we're going to finish it. No. The response from his fleet was immediate and unanimous. Despite their damage, despite the impossible odds, every captain reported ready for hyperspace jump. Set course for the Volani. Homeworld, Morrison ordered. It's time to show these machines what humans do when someone threatens innocent people. The damaged human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani home system, and what they saw made every person on every bridge fall silent in horror. The beautiful blue-green world that hung in space like a precious jewel was surrounded by death. Thousands upon thousands of Harvester ships filled the void around the planet like a metallic storm cloud. They moved in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming under the light of the system's twin suns. The sheer number of enemy vessels was overwhelming. Where the humans had fought 30 Harvester scouts at Kepler 44 to be, they now faced an armada that stretched beyond the horizon of space itself. "Dear God," whispered Captain Hayes, staring at the tactical display that could barely contain all the enemy contacts. There must be 10,000 ships out there. Lieutenant Katie Chen's voice was tight with fear as she read the sensor reports. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups across the Harvester fleet. They're preparing to begin planetary bombardment. Based on their current formation and the energy levels we're seeing, they could sterilize the entire planet's surface. Within 6 hours, Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet through the bridge's main viewport. In all his years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The harvesters moved like a single organism, each ship perfectly coordinated with thousands of others. They weren't just an army, they were a force of nature, as unstoppable as a hurricane or an earthquake. Communication coming in from the planet's surface, Chen reported. It's Elder Counselor Reth. The main screen flickered to life, showing the elderly Villani leader standing in what appeared to be an emergency bunker deep underground. Behind him, Morrison could see dozens of other Villani officials, their faces filled with terror as they watched their world's final moments approach. Admiral Morrison, Reth said, his voice heavy with grief and gratitude. You came. Even after everything that has happened, you came to help us. Morrison stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. We said we'd finish this fight, Counselor. Humans don't abandon their friends. Friends, Reth repeated softly as if the word was foreign to him. Yes, I suppose that is what we have become, despite all the fears and legends. But Admiral, surely you can see the situation is hopeless. Your fleet has already sacrificed so much. You've wounded aboard your ships, damage to your vessels. No one could ask you to face these odds. You didn't ask us to come here the first time either. Morrison replied with a grim smile. That's not how humans work. When someone calls for help, we answer. It doesn't matter if we know them or not. It doesn't matter what the odds are. Down in the engineering section of the UES Valiant, Chief Engineer Robert Stevens was working frantically alongside a team of Villani scientists who had been evacuated from their orbital research stations. For the past 18 hours, they had been studying the harvester technology recovered from the previous battle, trying to find some weakness they could exploit. Stevens looked up from the alien circuitry spread across his workbench, his face streaked with grease and exhaustion. Admiral, I need to speak with you immediately. Morrison activated his communicator. Stevens, please tell me you have good news. Better than good, sir. We've cracked their communication system. Harvesters don't operate as individual ships. They're all connected through a quantum neural network. Every ship in their fleet shares information instantaneously. That explains their coordination, Morrison said. But how does that help us? Stevens grinned, despite their desperate situation. Because their strength is also their weakness. If we can generate a powerful enough electromagnetic pulse, we can overload their entire network at once. Every ship would lose communication with the others and shut down simultaneously. Morrison felt a spark of hope for the first time since arriving in the system. What do you need to make this work? The Villani have orbital defense platforms around their planet, Stevens explained. Normally they're used to deflect asteroids and space debris, but if we can modify them and link them together, we can create an EMP burst powerful enough to affect the entire harvester fleet. One of the Villani scientists, an elderly female named Researcher Ven, stepped forward hesitantly. Admiral Morrison, the power requirements for such a pulse would be enormous. Our orbital platforms would need to channel the energy output of our planet's entire power grid. Can it be done? Morrison asked. Theoretically, yes, Ven replied. But the platforms were never designed to handle that much energy. Most of them would be destroyed in the process. And we would need perfect timing. If even one platform fails to activate at the precise moment, the entire plan would collapse. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the approaching harvester fleet. They had minutes, not hours, before the enemy began their bombardment. It was an impossible plan with 1,000 ways to fail, but it was the only chance they had. Do it, he ordered. Stevens, coordinate with the Villani engineers. I want every orbital platform linked and ready to fire on my command, as the human. And Villani engineers worked together. Morrison opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, going to attempt something that's never been tried before. We're going to generate an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to shut down the entire harvester fleet simultaneously. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy to help complete strangers. and now he was asking them to risk everything on a plan that might not even work. I won't lie to you. The odds are against us. Our ships are damaged, we're outnumbered beyond belief, and we're attempting a tactical maneuver that exists only in theory. But I've served with all of you for years, and I know what humans are capable of when we stand together. Captain Hayes stepped up beside Morrison, his voice carrying across the fleet communication system. All ships report ready, Admiral. Whatever happens, we're with you. The Harvester fleet was now close enough that individual ships could be seen with the naked eye. Their weapons were charging, preparing to turn the beautiful world below into a lifeless rock. On the planet's surface, billions of Villani civilians huddled in underground shelters, praying to their ancestors for salvation. Orbital platforms. Report ready, Stevens called out from engineering. Energy levels are at maximum. Sir, we need to fire now, or we'll lose our window. Morrison took one last look at the enemy fleet, then at his own damaged ships scattered around the system. 20 human vessels against 10,000 alien machines, the most hopeless odds in military history. All platforms fire. The space around, the Villani homeworld erupted in invisible energy as dozens of orbital defense platforms discharged their accumulated power simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse raced outward at the speed of light, washing over the Harvester fleet like a tidal wave of disruption. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy ships continued their approach, weapons still charging, victory seemingly assured then. One by one they began to go dark, starting with the ships closest to the planet and spreading outward like a wave. The entire Harvester fleet simply shut down. Their sleek hulls went cold, their weapons powered down, their engines stopped firing. 10,000 ships that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly became 10,000 pieces of lifeless metal drifting in space. The silence that followed was absolute. On every human ship, crews stared in amazement at their tactical amenities. Displays showing thousands of enemy contacts changing from active threats to inactive debris. On the planet below, Villani civilians emerged from their shelters to see metallic rain falling from the sky as disabled. Harvester ships entered the atmosphere and burned up like meteors. Elder Counselor Reth's voice broke the silence filled with wonder and gratitude. Admiral Morrison, your people have not only saved our world, you have shown us what it truly means to answer a call for help. From this day forward you shall be known among our people as Jack the Answerer, he who comes when called, no matter the distance, no matter the cost. Morrison smiled, watching as rescue ships from both fleets began collecting survivors from the disabled Harvester vessels. Even in victory, humans couldn't help but try to save lives, even enemy lives. Counselor Reth, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The Human-Villani Alliance was born that day, built not on trade agreements or territorial disputes, but on something far more powerful. The simple human belief that when someone calls for help, you answer, no matter who they are or where they come from.